My name is Fuyubi Nakamura. I'm curator for the exhibition Entangled Territories, Tibet Through Images, which is currently on view at the Museum of Anthropology at the University of British Columbia, known as MOA. I work as a curator for Asia at the MOA and also associate professor in the Department of Asian Studies at the University of British Columbia, or UBC. The exhibition Entangled Territories, Tibet Through Images reimagines Tibet by showing how Tibet has historically been represented by outsiders and how Tibetans themselves now present and talk about Tibet. By collaborating with Tibetan Canadian community members and artists, the exhibition showcases Tibet and Tibetans through their lenses and voices. Since visiting Dharamshala in India, where the Tibetan government exile is based, 30 years ago in 1995, and then Tibet in 2010, and Nepal in 2012, the Himalayan region has remained one of my areas of research interests for many years. I am thrilled to have this opportunity to curate and collaborate with Tibetan Canadian community members and artists to produce an exhibition about Tibet here at the MOA in Vancouver. The exhibition was developed in collaboration with Lodoe Kunphel Tibetan Language School, BC, at Tsengdok Monastery in Vancouver, which is supported and operated by the Tibetan Cultural Society of British Columbia and Tibetan Canadian artists. For nearly 7 decades, the political situation has resulted in the continuous displacement of Tibetans and their global relocation, forming what is now the Tibetan diaspora. Many of those who identify as Tibetan were not born within nor do they live in Tibet, but reside elsewhere, often in India and Nepal, and increasingly in North America and Europe. Canada is home to one of the largest concentrations of Tibetans outside of Asia, which is a key element of Canada's multicultural reality. The location and the status of Tibetan homeland remains a burning issue for Tibetans, especially for younger generations outside Tibet. Their lived experience in Canada is reshaping their identity and self-image, and many are questioning not only their diasporic conditions, but also imagining what homeland means. Entangled Territories re-engages with Tibetan community members in Canada and elsewhere to explore representations and memories of Tibet through images. Tibet, known as both to Tibetans, has a rich and long history dating back over 2,000 years. In the 7th and 8th centuries, Tibet formed a formidable power base in Central and Inner Asia, while political powers in the region shifted between different empires and kingdoms. Buddhism was introduced into Tibet from India between 6th to 9th centuries, becoming a central aspect of Tibetan lives. The British briefly invaded Tibet in 1903 to 1904 to counter Russia's influence in the region. In 1912, 13th Dalai Lama proclaimed Tibet's independence as a nation-state. In 1918, fighting broke out between British-trained Tibetan troops and the Chinese, an event which was followed by British attempt to mediate a settlement for Tibetan autonomy. Following China's Communist Revolution in 1949, Tibet was forced to surrender its independence and has been under China's occupation since 1951. After the failed uprising against Chinese rule in 1959, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tibet's political and spiritual leader, fled to exile in India, followed by about 80,000 Tibetans. The 14th Dalai Lama has remained in Dharamshala in India, the home to the Tibetan government in exile. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his conscious stance of peaceful resistance in his quest for Tibetan autonomy. He turned 90 in July 2025. Entangled Territories present Tibet, its culture, and its commitment in a different light. The exhibition also uplifts the effort of Tibetan Canadian communities to maintain their culture and history in the face of challenges associated with migration and the loss of their homeland. That the exhibition and the accompanying publication are produced bilingually in English and Tibetan itself is an important ethical and decolonizing statement. Not relying on English language sources alone works to unsettle academia and museum spaces, addressing unequal power dynamics and knowledge distribution. Tibetan Canadian community members and the artists selected items from the Tibetan collection at the Museum Anthropology at UBC or more for display and shared their reflections. I will use their words as much as possible to introduce their selected belongings, objects, and works. Before I introduce what they selected, the very first work you would encounter at the exhibition is a pair of photographs by the artist Lodoe entitled Colonized Colonizer. This is a pair of photos created in the artist studio, mostly with objects borrowed from her parents' home for the sets. They offer a reflection on her mixed Tibetan Canadian British heritage, colonial conditions of Tibet, and experience living on the land of other indigenous people in so-called Canada. What Tibetan community members selected varies, and for this reason, we are showcasing a diverse range of belongings, objects, and works from Tibet. I added a few items to their selection. We are showing 2 robes and blankets from Yapsi Yutok Kalon Tasi Dunlop collection at the Moor. The title Yapsi is given to all families that have Dalai Lama born into the family. The Yutok family is descended from the family of 10th Dalai Lama. It was a wish of Yutok family who migrated to Canada that the museum displayed the family's heirlooms so that visitors could learn about Tibet's rich history and culture. Many students selected these elaborate robes from this collection. By Tenzin Delki. This robe is meaningful to me because it shows Tibet's history and how Tibetans adapted outside influences while keeping their own culture alive. The fact that Chinese court robes were refitted into Tibetan jubas for aristocrats shows how valuable these textiles were and how Tibetans made them their own. I connect with this piece because it represents resilience and cultural preservation. Even with outside influences, Tibetans held on to their identity through clothing and traditions. Since I work to preserve Tibetan culture through my volunteer work, this robe reminds me why it is important to honor and protect our heritage. By Sangye Doma. In Tibetan history, silk robes were worn by and associated with nobles, royalty, and high-ranking monks. The silk, embroidered with sacred patterns in gold thread, symbolizes power and spiritual wisdom. This specific robe is lined with fur to provide warmth in the cold mountain climate. Worn during special occasions, these garments reflect both the wearer's status and deep cultural devotion. By Tenzin Zen. This robe is meaningful to me because it represents a deep connection between Tibetan and Mongolian history. It carries a legacy of the time when cultures intertwined, influences spiritual and political traditions. The intricate design and symbolism reflect respect, devotion, and exchanges of ideas that shape Tibet's past. Owning or studying this robe allows you to connect with the history, honoring the traditions and meanings woven into its fabric. One of the artists, Kun Kion, also selected this robe. I've never seen a Tibetan robe quite like this one. The delicate peacock feathered embroidery contrasts with abstract geometric patterns in brighter colors. The fur trim as a low, tactile element, balancing the detailed work. The robe, simple in form, carries a weight of cultural influences, each thread a reminder of trade, craftsmanship, and the power. The robe reflects the complexity of what home means, shaped by histories and cultures that are not fixed, but the result of various influences, some of them conflicting. By Tenzin Turten. When I first saw this item, it immediately made me think the person who wore it had to be someone really important and highly respected. The first thing that I noticed is a deep navy color of the robe. It's such a strong, rich color, and from what I know, this was often linked to nobility. All this makes me feel that this belonged to somebody with a high status in society. By Tenzin Luang. This blue robe reminds me of the nobility of Tibet. Tibetans who had worn this historical piece in the past held a high position in Tibetan society. This made me feel deep admiration because the nobles played a crucial role in preserving Tibet's rich cultural heritage, traditions, and spiritual values. By Dr. Cherin Shakya. Tibetan woolen blankets are known as Nambu. They are made from sheep's wool, woven into strips that are about a foot wide and can be of any length. The wool yarn is dyed using natural vegetable dyes, which are prepared by weavers themselves. A typical blanket is composed of several narrow strips, sewn together to form a larger piece. The patterns on the materials are referred to as gyatram, which means cross. This is a popular indigenous design featuring colors and lines that create an abstract image. Tibetan indigenous designs tend to be geometric and abstract, so they have also been influenced by Indian, Mongolian, and Chinese styles, which lean more toward figurative representations. Additionally, this design is often given a Buddhist meaning and is referred to by a cross. We are also showing few objects made from animal and human bones. Human remains in the museum collections present a complex ethical challenge. Objects made from human remains are often removed from their cultural context and have been misidentified or misunderstood, frequently without recognizing the significance they hold in cultures that use human bones for ritual and ceremonial purposes. Ritual objects made both from human and animal bones are a distinctive feature of Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. To Tibetans, human bones serve as a reminder of life's brevity and the inevitability of death. Bones have additional symbolic dimensions. Tibetans view skulls as natural containers, that unshaped by human hands represent the inherent goodness that reflects the natural state of the mind. Tibetan Buddhists often donated their skulls and bones to monasteries in order to gain spiritual merit after their death. By Doji Doma. When I first saw this bone ritual object, I was immediately drawn into its intricate craftsmanship. I learned that this ceremonial breast cover was worn by Tibetan spiritual practitioners during high rituals as a sacred adornment symbolizing impermanence and Buddhist devotion. Delicately carved with images of Buddha and strung together with beads, this bone ritual object reflects centuries of Tibetan spiritual tradition and devotion. What fascinates me most is how this single object embodies Tibet's complex relationship with impermanence. The main material itself, once a part of water buffalo body, serves to remind us that nothing lasts forever. Yet, they've been transformed into something sacred and enduring. Even as the world around us transforms, pieces of identity endure through objects like this. In a world where Tibet is often romanticized or criticized, this necklace offers something authentic, a tangible connection to real Tibetan traditions that continue despite decades of cultural challenges. It is not just beautiful, it is meaningful. By Tenzin Sangmo. The Damaru carries a unique energy. Its sound is both haunting and grounding, like a heartbeat echoing from the unseen. Traditionally made from two skull halves, it serves as a profound reminder of impermanence, how life is always changing, always sacred. But for me, the Damaru holds a deeper meaning. You see in the hands of Lord Shiva and also in hands of enlightened beings within Tibetan spiritual practice. The image has always touched something deep in me. In this simple drum, I see a sacred bridge connecting Tibetan Buddhism and Hinduism to spiritual paths that shaped my soul. The Damaru becomes more than an instrument. It becomes a prayer in motion, a rhythm of unity and transformation. With every beat, I feel myself drawn closer to something greater, something timeless, beyond words. Tenzin Sangmo also selected two other objects. Spinning a prayer wheel has always felt like a gentle offering to the universe. I've watched elders do it with such grace, each spin sending out intentions of wisdom and compassion. The soft, steady motion seems to clear the air around me, purifying the mind and heart. The mantra carved into the wheel speak without words, and each tongue feels like a whispered prayer. Even when not speaking aloud, I feel deeply connected, as if the wheel itself is praying for me. For me, a sacred amulet box is more than just a protection. It's the heart of spiritual life. It's where prayers begin and where quiet reflection feels more natural. I remember my father telling me stories of how, during times of war, Tibetan soldiers would carry their personal amulet box, not just for prayer, but for protection. They believed the amulet box power could save them from harm, and in that belief, they found strength. Even on the battlefield, the amulet box stood as a symbol of safety and divine support that always stayed with them. I added two more items from the Tibetan collection for display. This woodblock print bears a Tibetan calligraphic inscription of mantra. The calligraphic text is written in headed or uchin Tibetan script, which is characterized by upright block letters and short horizontal lines. Such printed images are displayed inside temples and homes or as framed tourist souvenirs. This is a work by Khalsan Dawa entitled Mandala of Compassion. Khalsan Dawa was a Tibetan tanka artist. Born in Tibet, he began his studies in traditional Tibetan art at the age of 14 in Lhasa, Tibet. He later studied in Dharamshala, India, under the guidance of master tanka artist Venerable Sangye Yashe, the former personal painter for the 14th Dalai Lama. In 1998, he moved to Vancouver, Canada, and also started creating works of contemporary art. Dawa's paintings are in monasteries and private collections in India, Europe, Japan, Canada, and United States. Sadly, he passed away in January 2025 in Vancouver. This work, which Moore commissioned from the artist in 2009, is showcased in this exhibition in his memory. Before I introduce the other works by Lodoe, I will show the object the artist and her father selected as her work related to the relationship. By Junmei Wangdan. This is an ordinary cup for ordinary people. It is not a monk's cup. It is made of wood. Rich people may use cups made of gold or silver, but if you put something hot things in a metal cup, it will burn your lips. Wooden ones won't. I used something like this when I was in Tibet. We use this type of cup for tea and soup. When we travel, we carry a cup and ask people along the way if they can offer some tea or food. If you have your own cup, you will offer something to eat and drink. You always have to bring your own cup. You don't have to wash it. You just wipe and reuse it. Wooden cup is gentle, like Tibetans. It is a simple and nice object. By Lodoe. Since my father chose to display a cup, I chose to display a metal vessel. It could be seen as companion object to the cup. My pala says that where he is from, and a vessel like this could be used in many ways. It could be used for tea or chang, Tibetan beer. When you go out into the field, ceramic pot could easily break, but metal vessel like this one is sturdier. Every morning, we fill 7 bowls of water as an offering. In Tibet, a vessel like this could be used to transfer water to pour into bowls. In this way, it is really a multi-purpose vessel. We are showing some photos from the series Para and Me. These photos are taken in a place that artist and her father used to travel in her childhood. It is a location where they can see into Tibet on a clear day. We are also showing photographs from another series called Para. This series came about when the artist lived with her father, Para, in Tibetan, in a monastery that he helps administer in Kathmandu, Nepal. It is a place where her parents met and a place where she spent a lot of her childhood. The monastery was run by her great-uncle, who was a lama. When he died, her father took over the responsibility of managing the monastery. Because of the political climate inside Tibet, it is not possible for the head lama in Tibet to visit the monastery. So it remains in a state of waiting. There is a sense of absence in these images. The monastery is also a place that is personal to the artist, as her first memories are from this particular side. I'd like to add that exhibitions on Tibet held outside of Tibet have predominantly been and continue to be about Tibetan Buddhism or Tibetan religious art. While Buddhism is clearly an important aspect of Tibetan culture, this exhibition aims to offer a different perspective on Tibet. Entangled Territory presents a varied range of historical contemporary works from and about Tibet, all of which touch upon overarching political context in some way, but the following work in particular. In the last few decades, 169 people have self-immolated in protest of conditions inside the Tibetan Autonomous Region and beyond. Working with the archives of Tibetan activists and advocacy groups, the artists conducted research into the traveling trend and practice of self-immolation in the Tibetan community and collected photographs of the self-immolated. Each portrait was originally printed by hand using handmade charcoal ink. The artist and father collected charcoal incense banned in Tibetan Buddhist smoking offerings rituals from the diaspora community following their prayers to create handmade ink. We are also showcasing some material from Eric Parker collection in the Moore's archive as artist Kun-san Kilon used them to create a new film, especially for the exhibition. Rick Parker was a British military commander stationed in Gyatse who trained the Tibetan army in 1918 to 1921 after the Tibetan government in Lhasa invited the British to help strengthen its newly established modern army. Parker corresponded with members of the Tibetan government, including the 13th Dalai Lama. After completing his military service, Parker became accepting of Tibetan culture and learned to speak Tibetan Urdu, Tamil, and Punjabi. Parker married in Calcutta in 1923 and with his wife traveled back to Tibet on horseback. During the stay in Tibet, Parker collected numerous objects, kept letters, and took photographs that provide a rare documentation of this period in Tibet history. In his retirement, he relocated to Canada and passed away in Victoria, in British Columbia. In 2005, photographs, texture records, and objects were donated to the museum by Parker's daughter, Mary Noble. Based on artists' research into the museum's archival materials on Tibet, Letters from Tibet was made specifically for the exhibition. The film uses photographs taken by Eric Parker during his time in Tibet, along with excerpts from his actual letters, which scroll down across the bottom of the frame. A fictional contemporary archivist responds to these letters through voice-over narration. The film places Parker's photograph alongside the clips from Frank Capra's 1937 film, Lost Horizons, which imagined a fictional utopia in the mountains of Tibet. By combining archival documents with cinematic representations, Letters from Tibet explores how Tibet has been recorded, mythologized, and interpreted over time. We are also showing her earlier work called Yarun. Yarun tells a story of three children in the rural village who experience the death of a loved one, ultimately finding resolution through their connection to Yarun Tantsuk River. The story blends fiction and non-fiction, drawing on artist's childhood experience of visiting a small Tibetan refugee settlement called Tezu in northern India, where her mother was born. The artist also explores the shaping of Tibetan identity without relying on the Western gaze. He long explores the nuances of daily life rather than perpetuating the mystification of what is to be Tibetan. The film was made using charcoal and was animated frame by frame under the camera. Entangled Territories not only complement Moore's ongoing engagement with preserving global cultural heritage, but also enable museums to reflect on contemporary issues and advocate for social justice. While Moore is renowned for its Pacific Northwest First Nation collection, Asian collection is actually the largest collection held at the museum and account for around 40% of its entire holdings. Tibetan Canadian community members engage with Moore's Tibetan collection and share their reflections on selected Tibetan objects and belongings. The rich Moore collections enable them to experiment and reconsider their own cultural heritage. I had hoped to invite and work with Lhasa-based artists for this exhibition, but unfortunately, given the complex situation in which she finds herself, she did not feel safe participating in this exhibition in Canada. I previously worked with different talented Tibetan artists, Notse, based in Lhasa for an earlier exhibition which I curated in 2017, having met him in Lhasa in 2010. While he could not travel, his artwork traveled on his behalf, and he was able to share what both he and his culture have faced under Chinese Communist government. It is my hope that this exhibition and its accompanying publication, Entangled Territories, will be important legacy that helps to preserve and disseminate knowledge about Tibet, especially the sustained effort of Tibetan Canadian community and diasporic community members to maintain their culture, their history, and their language in the face of challenges associated with migration and loss of their homeland.